everyone. My name is Lee Perry, and I'm the senior aide to Commissioner Wilson.
Happy Friday.
Super excited to see you all today.
Okay, my Happy Friday was so insincere. Happy Friday, I really mean it.
Happy Friday.
Seriously.
You've been through a lot
Busy.
this week.
It's been busy, but really good.
Yeah,
Very
so how are
productive.
you feeling?
Good. It was busy. We had a board meeting on Tuesday. So of course Monday is getting all the information that we need to go into Tuesday. That's where sort of making sure that each part of that agenda that we cover the information and that we're trying to make good decisions. And some of the things we don't get to discuss until we get to the board meeting. So it's more or less trying to make sure we keep in mind or jot down on notes what we want to discuss when we're able to get out in the sunshine meeting with the commissioners, the other commissioners and the mayor.
Well, I'm super excited. I know you wanted to touch on just a couple quick things before we
Yes.
dive into your BCC.
Housekeeping item. I know that there's a lot of information that comes flying at the public about COVID-19 testing and vaccination. I want to remind people in Orange County that our 311 system here, which is just available to every citizen of Orange County, that really is set up to help citizens find what department they need or utility question and answered, that they are trained now to help people navigate that vaccine portal and help them if they are a little bit challenged, as I can often be with the online component of it, that they're trained to help walk through that. So they are trained with a bunch of FAQs about vaccines, locations, and the general process, and they will help. If you have a family member that's just having a hard time navigating that third-party app, which is what we're using for appointments, they can help with that.
And, if you have any questions, our research aide, Anne, she's been really pivotal in finding out information that, the county adds for, different types of resources for rental assistance or any type of questions that you have. Please.
You know what, let me.
Oh, go ahead.
Reminder there. So
Yeah.
our eviction diversion program is ongoing. So the CARES funding, obviously, that we had for some other individual and small business, until the federal government reallocates that there's it no longer. It's literally all been distributed, but they continue to match people in the any landlords who are interested in tenants in the eviction diversion program. And those are Orange County funds that are being used there. It's a voluntary program, but it's really making a huge difference in keeping people in their homes right now. So that is still ongoing. If you go to the Orange County website, all the information is there for the application.
And if for whatever reason you have a hard time navigating the website, or maybe you don't have access to the internet, feel free to give us a call. We can drop the number in the chat if you have internet right now, you're watching. If not, and you maybe might be asking on behalf of a friend, feel free to email district1@ocfl.net and we can answer your questions.
Yeah, I think, the people that I've spoken with sort of informally recently, it's been for some of like an elderly relative or aunt and uncle, and trying to make sure that they are getting the most updated information. Sometimes we are the best conduits for our parents and aunts and uncles. So I really appreciate everybody out there that's taken on that role of being a good information provider for them at this time, because I know every day it seems to change a little bit, and we really want to try to help as many people as possible. I am very, very hopeful that the supply of vaccine ramps up quickly. I know that there are, a large percentage of our population has gotten their first vaccine. I know the second vaccines, not large percentage, I should say that. A percentage of the people who are eligible, which in the state of Florida, under the governor's orders, have been 65 and up, and first responders or people in the medical profession. So what we're really hoping to see is, with that additional supply, getting in some more of the high risk people of all age groups. Orange County did a really great thing and set aside a day for a pod for vaccines for 65 and up educators, our teachers, because the teachers were ordered to go back into classrooms, and they really should have been part of I think, obviously that first group of people that were vaccinated, knowing that their jobs required them to be in a classroom face-to-face with students.
And I just think here in Orange County, we're very fortunate because I think the capacity is unlike anything I've ever seen before. A lot of people, as we said in other virtual office hours, were really kind of redirected in their role. And the freezer space is really huge here.
Yeah, and I just think about today we had a tour of some of our family services department and how we walked by empty offices of people who had been literally relocated to assist in applications for all the programs that Orange County began months ago, trying to help small businesses, individuals, and eviction diversion.
So feel free to comment if you have any questions. We take questions at the end of the virtual office hours, and the commissioner can answer all of them for you live.
Yeah, and if I don't know the answer, we will try to find it. And I know with the ongoing updates and with the mayor does ongoing COVID updates, but it's anxiety provoking, and I know that. So we will definitely work really hard to try to find the best and most accurate answers.
Another quick little update this past week, I posted on almost every platform that I could think of about the Vision 2050 surveys.
Yes, it's not over till it's over. They extended the survey deadline, which I think is a really, it's a good thing, because I think honestly sometimes that the last stretch is when we hear from the most people. So if you haven't had an opportunity to do your Vision 2050 survey response, please do that today or tomorrow. When is the updated deadline?
So it's end of March, but I'll tell you, there's 3 surveys. They're pretty quick.
They're quick, and I think at this stage of the planning process, the number of them that are received actually ends up being as important as what's on them, because I think there's a perception of apathy that maybe people aren't really that interested in that planning and the growth and how we grow. I believe, because I know I've spoken with many of you about this, that it's very much an interest to the people of Orange County. So make sure that you go in, you can look at the presentations that they've been doing, and you can do those surveys now. It's going to be an ongoing process. I had my own concerns, big concerns about the things and the way that they are looking at planning and growth for the next 20 years. But we need everybody in on that, because I'm only one person. I know that as an elected official, it seems like I should be able to do more, but what I am is your voice. So if I understand and have a clear mandate, I can be as effective as possible.
Yeah, and a survey is like a vote, So if you go in, don't just hit the numbers, write comments.
Yes.
I think that's actually even more important,
Yes.
is that these surveys are meant to be broad, and then the comment box is where you can add your specific need that you'd like to see addressed.
Yes. Yes. Or, what you feel like is being overlooked. And we're going to get into the environmentally sensitive lands. I find that they do a great job of identifying wetlands, because it is something that has a variety of layers of oversight, whereas some of our really sensitive uplands or other environmentally sensitive areas, based on whether or not it's because of connectivity or because of some endemic species that aren't marked. We don't know where are those, and why wouldn't those be incorporated in growth and planning?
So you had a BCC meeting this past week, and I learned a lot. What did you feel were some takeaways?
Yeah, it was a really good meeting. There was some discussion items that meant a lot to District 1, to this commissioner, to this office, including the the re-examination of the Green Place program, which is a program that was initially rolled out the Department of Environmental Protection here in Orange County to try to hold on to some of those environmentally sensitive pieces of property that are needed to protect our air, our water, our ecosystems, and to connect other pieces of environmentally sensitive property. There hasn't been a purchase, an acquisition by the county of an environmentally sensitive piece of property since 2009, even though this program was technically in place. It makes me want to cry to think of that, because there were many years that we saw such tremendous growth in our economy and tremendous growth in our development. And part of what that the impact fees are supposed to go to is to mitigate or to offset the damages done by the growth. Well, the tool that was in the tool chest of ways to make sure that we were offsetting that growth was to properly fund and utilize the green space program. Well, much like Amendment 1 at the state, which is where the voters ask the state to set aside important environmentally sensitive properties and make sure that they're protected for generations to come. Somehow it got set aside. Other budget priorities were put in front of it. So to see it on the agenda this week and to hear the enthusiasm from the entire board, to hear the mayor speak with decisive and unambiguous terms about his commitment to the Green Place funding. And if you didn't have an opportunity to hear the mayor's comments and my comments and some of the other commissioners' comments, you can go to Orange TV and check out the very exciting BCC meeting archives. But what the mayor says, and it's really true, is that we have to be intentional. You know, I said, you know, previous to that, that it was a mandate, that this is a mandate, that the voters of Orange County had 2 charter amendments that were specifically speaking to environmental concerns on the very last page of a very complex ballot this November, and record turnout approvals for both of those. We're talking 86% and 90%. And I know there are detractors that will say, oh, the public doesn't know what they were voting on. This was written to try to, you know, it was a good sounding amendment. No, I don't think that's the case at all. I actually think that if you're going to get that far on your ballot and you're going to vote yes, it's because you think it's really important. And it was clearly a bipartisan and MPA priority, because you don't get to 90% of approval from voters with just one party or the other party. So that's a mandate for all of us. And to hear it this week, you know, from the commission, from the mayor, felt to me like the start of a new day. We will continue to follow up with that as an office that understands what a priority it is for our constituents and our residents in identifying some of those opportunities to purchase or acquire sensitive areas. We have some, I believe, very ecologically sensitive and valuable pieces of property that we will definitely go to bat for. So stay tuned on those. We're going to need continued dialogue as far as how to move forward and make sure that District 1 isn't left out of the next series of acquisitions. Because that was the other thing I found really disappointing, was that when they showed the county map of the the green space acquisitions to date, there was one in District 1.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So sorry, we had a technical difficulty where our camera shut off, but that's okay. We were talking about conservation land acquisition by the board, the BCC meeting, and how you guys all voted on it. I definitely wanted to bring up the fact that climate change is a real issue that is only going to be combated by a collective effort, and reforestation and conservation programs are essential to that. So congratulations on that huge win. You know,
it's huge. And I think I think we have to look at, when we talk about acquiring environmentally sensitive lands, it's not an isolated thought. You're exactly right. It's about, you know, trying to do something about our carbon footprint here. Mm-hmm. And I think people who live inland don't think that sea level rise or climate change is somehow going to affect them. And when you look at what's going on with our overall rainfall totals, our you know, the loss of biodiversity, those are all really things that are threats to all of us, and you know, in so many different ways. So to me, it feels like we need to move fast, that we need to do things that are really, really aggressive. But this feels like a really good start to hear the consensus from the mayor and commissioner. And I know that all the commissioners, and I know that that EPD is very excited, and they are ready to get moving on mm-hmm. you know, getting that Green Place initiative back to mm-hmm. really it should have been over the last 10 years.
Yeah. Some other things that you talked about during the BCC was the Tangelo Park YMCA. Maybe you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think the bigger discussion that I sort of wanted to hit on was the CRA, which CRA, and I think we've talked about it in one of these, but I just want to make sure that that acronym thing is a nightmare. So I want to be really clear. It's the Community Redevelopment Act, and it's basically this legislation oversees the way that we can budget for a community that is trying to redevelop an area of blight. I think almost every urban area or even municipality or not every municipality, but there are many, many municipalities that have at some point utilized a CRA or community redevelopment in order to revitalize an area and to bring it out of what is considered maybe a time of blight or needing some additional funds to pick up the slack in what has been, some place that was either economically affected or had other historical challenges in trying to make sure that the residents there get the full quality of life that everyone in the county gets. Well, in Orange County, there are multiple CRAs. One of them is in iDrive, and it is probably the one that is the most talked about, at least right now, and probably is going to be for some time, because iDrive is an area that is a large commerce for our area. We have many great small and big businesses there that do a lot for our economy. The CRA that was initially designated for the iDrive area was earmarked by the commission, Orange County Commission, way before my time, way before the time of many of the people that are here now, to fix some of the transportation woes that they were having there, and to really try to make that corridor easier for people who are coming in to visit, in the thought that would then make sure that all of those businesses there could run the best to their ability. If you look at the CRA objectives that were put in place in the initial ordinance or the initial agreement, they're done. They've done a really good job of finishing those. So what happens is the CRA sunsets. There's an end date, it expires. And typically, if what has been considered blight has been addressed and the issues that were specifically chosen by a board to be addressed have been resolved, there is no need to renew a CRA or to bring back an additional, term of that CRA. So what's going on in the discussions right now, and what happened in the meeting on Tuesday, is that Tangelo Park, which is a neighborhood that is very close to the International Drive corridor, and that traditionally does really need some additional resources and community development, and they've been, I think, very integral to the conversations about whether or not the renewal of the CRA is going to happen, or if it is, how it's going to affect them. So what was on the agenda was actually a discussion about a YMCA in Tangelo Park, that the facility itself, the building and the property, are Orange County, and the YMCA had a lease agreement with Orange County. Well, that lease agreement is terminating. The YMCA is leaving that area, and the building itself needs a lot of help. The people in that community really need to have a community center. I think it's really important they have that. And so there's really no controversy about whether or not that project needs to happen. The controversy or the conversation that we're having is, how is it paid for? Does it come out of our general fund, which there's no prohibition for that coming out of a general fund, or does that come from a CRA where it's earmarked for a specific area? And one of the things that if you go back and look at the meeting, some of the the questions that arose were, do we have enough money in the existing CRA, which expires in 2028, to pay for the refurbishment and remodeling of that community center? Or would it have to go into the CRA for a renewal of an entire CRA? Well, it's really important to know that all of the decisions of where the money is spent in a community redevelopment plan like that, they're made by the county commission and the mayor with input from the community and stakeholders. And so those can be amended. They can be amended when necessary. So it's not an either or, it's not an all or nothing. If there is a CRA in place and there's part of that community is feeling that, either that the projects that have been prioritized are not including them, or that there is an omission of some important project, there can be amendments to the CRA. So that's what sort of the thrust of the conversation was: can we include this with the existing CRA? And the answer was yes. I don't know if that's going to end up happening on a future agenda, so we'll stay tuned for that. But if you heard the conversation, I want to make sure that we're very clear. That is completely separate from an agreement or a vote to renew the CRA term for another 20 years. So that will be a whole nother set of meetings and priorities, because one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that if we are funneling any money from the general fund into any other silo, that it helps the most people that it possibly can. And if the fund is set up based on legislation, which the state does put the legislation that kind of gives the umbrella of how to do that. The legislation says it needs to be for blight, which means that the community that needs some help. So, that is clear to me that if it's a community project that brings the most good to the most people, it is something that I think would be agreeable by most of the commission, at least myself. If there is a better way for that money to be used in the general fund, and it can be used for communities across the county, then I think that sounds like an option that allows for more flexibility and for really, I think, equity in making sure that there aren't communities that are left out because they don't have whatever draw may be bringing attention to the community that is getting a CRA put in place.
And I know that we will have a lot of discussions on
Yes.
that when it comes in. And, I know a hot button word right now
Yes.
is affordable housing.
Yes,
Affordable housing.
that's right. And I think so. Yeah, it's hot button, and I think it's really important that we look at, if we're talking about hospitality industry and the tourist area in Orange County, we have to acknowledge that very few people who work there live there, because there isn't any affordable housing until you get to Williamsburg, which is part of District 1, or to Tangelo Park. And those are just on different sides of that I-Drive corridor. So when you look at how we're going to spend money and how we're going to improve people's lives and what those investments look like, my questions are always going to be, how many people will be affected by this? What are our most equitable uses of this? And how do we make sure that that we're, if we're doing something that takes money from one area over to another, how do we make sure that that's fair? How do we make sure that's equitable? And so it's those CRA type decisions for me are, take a lot of homework. It's going to take a lot of research, because I think it's really, really important to know that lawmakers oftentimes act like they were restricted by that CRA. They created it. They created the CRA. They can amend the CRA. But once it's in place, there are dates that are kind of, require, us to look at those dates. They're in place, and it's a geographical area. So, it's just an important thing for us to keep an eye on, and we'll keep talking about it. We would love input from everyone, and we all across the county. It doesn't have to be a District 1 issue, because I think this is a county-wide concern, and those votes do, they affect everybody. So we'll keep that dialogue going.
I feel like soon there'll be an entire series of these virtual office hours about it when that comes up. But right now, I know so many people have reached out with questions about this next item that you got a briefing on this week. Bird Island,
yes.
Also called Egret Island,
Yes.
I believe.
I think historically,
Yeah. So many people have talked about rigorous partying, lots of noise. It's supposed to be a conservation area. I think there's even been a death that's happened
Yeah.
here. It's very dangerous. You even told a story this week that really sent, chills
Chills.
down my spine about how people are swimming to the island
We saw
in
it.
the area where
High speed,
high speed boats,
ski boats zipping back and forth, jet skis. There's been accidents. It's they're, obviously feel, looks like just the most, really, I think that we are fortunate there hasn't been more tragedy, and there has been tragedy. So this has been a long time coming. This was something that citizens in that area have pursued and communicated. Audubon Society holds the conservation easement, or the conservation deed for Bird Island, and so they've been active in the conversation about what the next steps would be to preserve it. So the Fish and Wildlife Commission, FWC, is an active participant. The Sheriff's Department has to be on this. The City of Windermere, which I had the pleasure this week of talking to the city manager for the City of Windermere and for the town of Oakland. So we're all making sure that the communication is ongoing. Basically what they're doing, what we're doing here in House, is updating an ordinance that was largely preempted by the state anyway and needed to be updated, and can now include some very specific items that will help protect, hopefully, people and the environment in and around Bird Island. And so I think there's a lot of information coming, but just know that the language for the ordinance is in place, the timeline is in place, and that by summer there should be some really substantial changes in enforcement, including some new no wake zones to make sure that that speed issue isn't ongoing in critical areas, making sure that there are that we're protecting the high and dry area of Bird Island, and designating areas that you cannot drop anchor, and then areas that can be swim but not dry land, that you cannot get to dry land. So they've all been mapped out. We had a great briefing with the people at EPD, the Environmental Protection Division, here about it. The code will be updated, and that timeline will, I think, largely be so that when we get back into the water, more or less, I mean, I know we're in Florida, so people are in the water year round, but when the volume of people going out there, when that comes around, that we really have some enforceable solutions to keep the animals safe, the people safe, the people who live there, I know, are stressed and concerned, and it's looked like, very chaotic at times, but there is a plan, and we will continue to pursue making sure we stay on that timeline. If you have any specific questions about it, am I missing anything?
No, I mean, I learned a lot for sure. I didn't know that the state basically preempts the erosion stipulations,
Yes,
that you're basically allowed to do things that could eventually erode the shoreline, and then there's no protections really. So by dropping anchor and by speeding past Bird Island, there's been quite a bit of erosion that's taken place, and there's really nothing.
And it's a very narrow. It's a narrow corridor there, where the erosion, the safety there. I mean, there's such multiple layers of concern with high speed and high volume, and I think some of it was really magnified during this past year when people were working and schooling from home, because they were utilizing these outdoor spaces more, which is what we want. We want to make sure that people are getting outside and that they're doing that, but we have to keep everybody and all of that, the increased volume in mind when we make decisions going forward. So let me just really quickly, while I'm looking at this, say so in spring, I don't have an actual date yet, but that'll be coming. There is going to be the finalized language with some of those protections, including a community meeting, basically making sure we're getting any last feedback, and then in the summer 2021, There'll be the permitting of the vessel exclusion zone swim area. So, and that does, like I said, that has to go through coordination with the Florida Wildlife and with actually also with the Army Corps of Engineers. I'm seeing on here. So that's why some of those things it feels like it takes forever to get it done. But we had to basically pull out, dead ordinance language because of the state preemption, and then update and include some extra protections in the new ordinance. And so that is, they've been working very hard to make sure that they listened to the concerns of the residents out there and that was going to be put into place.
And I know that probably some of the pushback from residents could be that a lot of people grew up going here. A lot of people grew up with this behavior of like, this is kind of our vacation spot.
Which is fine. And I think that's where we're trying to find that balance. And I think they've done a really good job of making sure that the recreation is welcome, but in a way that we're being conscious of others and that we're being conscious of our safety issues. Mm-hmm. I mean, the reality of it is you're always going to be subject to all Florida laws if you're out on the water, right? So the idea of, people who are drinking and boating, bad idea. The idea of dropping anchor in a sensitive land, also a bad idea. One of those should be enforced much like the other, but I think there's been a lot of difficulty getting enforcement because the jurisdictional issues of Florida Wildlife Commission being sort of in charge of Bird Island, since it's a piece of conservation land, and the Orange County Sheriff being the law enforcement entity that is, our Orange County Sheriff is sort of our law enforcement entity. They oftentimes are stretched very thin, especially when it comes to that type of a water response. So, enforcement is difficult at the best of times, and so I think the clear updating of the ordinance it's going to make it easier for enforcement. I know that the city of Windermere has had a lot of challenges in that they've been pulled to some of these things, even though technically, out of city limits in the middle of the lake is not necessarily a place jurisdictionally where Windermere police would be needing to respond. So we're really hoping to be a good neighbor or steward of making sure that ordinance is enforced once in place, the updates, mm-hmm. and that we communicate with both the enforcers at FWC and at the Sheriff's Department in getting that coverage.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we have a little bit of time. I don't think we have any questions, right, Ernest? Oh, we do? Okay. Let's go ahead and answer some questions, and if not, then we can go on to some other updates.
We have a question from Kelly Rochelle saying, can you cover golf cart use in the Horizon West area?
I don't know.
No, we didn't get any briefing on that. I know that we've had a couple emails about whether or not there will be a golf cart lane added around because they're concerned that might alleviate some traffic concerns.
Yes, and we did see, so we did have a very, very broad overview of some of the ongoing projects through Parks and Rec. We're going to get into a bigger briefing coming up about the Horizon West Community Park, and I'm super excited about that. And it did show where they are trying to make sure that some of those trails are connecting. I don't know what the dialogue has been previous to our coming into office about the golf cart usage and if where those would be permitted, but we can certainly get that answer. That would be something that we can go back and find out if there were I guess considerations,
original plans. And I know that it's changed a little bit, but there's definitely an ongoing conversation. And of course, if you email district1@ocfl.net, we can definitely try to get you a timeline on those answers. I think there's a lot of other things that are a little bit, not to say that it's more important or not, but I think certain streets are still being put in.
There are
traffic lights.
Yeah, which, this has been such a headache for so many of us. the lag time in some of that infrastructure is really frustrating. And I know it comes down to things like right of way agreements between private property holders and the county. What I'm trying hard to do is to make sure that when development plans come in front of me, or when they're going through the process, is finding out if they overlap with some of those areas that I know have been safety concerns or concerns about connectivity, in trying to see where we are in the infrastructure part of it, because the housing component just outpaces the infrastructure part, and it's really frustrating. And I think it's something that we really need to do a better job of, the timing and the thoughtfulness of that infrastructure in the development phasing, right? So you see like these phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and I think sometimes you see the hopscotch of the building development hopscotching over those roadways. Now, I don't know for golf carts if there was ever some kind of a plan. I know that in the city of Winter Garden, I know that there are municipalities, and actually I think, well, I don't know. Let me do my homework on that. I was going to give some information that I'm not 100% on. So let me do my homework on that, and we will definitely make sure to get that information out.
We have another question from Dave Waring, touching base again on the hockey court in Horizon West.
Okay, so
we never got a hockey briefing.
No, so we do have a meeting next week with Matt Sudemeyer of Parks and Recreation. I've only really seen the design maps, and so there are some what look like multi-use fields, and I think there are some tennis courts and some.
Yep.
But
in like a botanical garden, and
but what we can do, if you will email District 1 at ocfl.net and just sort of give me a bullet point that I can take with me to that meeting, that we can then bring back some better answers. Or if you have something that we can even, if there's a I don't know, request, even if it's something that I get turned down on, we can find out what the steps are. So email that over, and that way we can put that literally right in with the calendar as a question, because I don't know. I know that, it looks like it's going to be, it's obviously it's something that's so needed out there. And so I'm really excited about the community park. And I know that making sure that those, we have several trail projects going on, including connecting the West Orange Trail to I can't think of the name of the connector, and the trails that were committed. There was a committed trailway through Horizon West. So we will make sure that those get done. I know there were many, many different entities that were given the right to develop those trails as they were either developing or putting in other infrastructure. So it's going to take us kind of, I do think, doing some of that follow up and making sure that the plans match with what's going on, and we're learning a little bit better about where those are and who was given that either permission or as part of the development agreement.
Yeah, and it seems like everything's rolling out in phases, so you'll kind of learn more as you're getting more briefings on these different phases going in, and the community will be involved.
Yeah, but that being said, the earlier you let me know about, if you know something, the earlier I can take it. Like I said, not hearing about this, having these conversations before going in to the meeting with Parks and Rec really helps. And we've been able to get answers, about some other issues that we've known about early on that we could go in and get at those meetings without having to hunt people back down, and before anything gets away from us, because sometimes, the thing that really stinks is I think sometimes we hear about things after the fact, and it's hard to rewind. And so getting that information up front, so important that we can take in, and especially since it's the phases of that park, there'll be a phase phased in.
Any other questions? Nope. So let's just talk about two things that you did this week that I thought were very interesting. You had a chance to tour EPD.
I did. It was amazing. I will tell you that I feel like they are, they do so much more than I think anybody really knows what they do. So our air quality is monitored under the Clean Air Act, but that doesn't mean that the Clean Air Act and all of its requirements are done by the federal government. The federal government literally works with local, state, and local governments. Orange County has its own air monitoring, and there are requirements. They actually have categories of potential air polluters that they monitor very closely, and in different areas of worry and of concern that they monitor very closely. I think going forward and talking about acquiring our environmentally sensitive lands, and then hearing about some of the air quality degradation that they've seen at EPD over the last years, it couldn't happen fast enough. All right, like getting that tree canopy and making sure that we've got some natural filtration. Don't get me wrong, we also need to make sure that our polluters are being held to account, but making sure that we get some of the buffer tree canopy up it's critical. The programs at EPD, we could do a whole one of these on all the things they do. And I don't know, Lee, if you think that this might be a good idea at some point for us to actually take our live on the road and see if they would even be interested in doing a little, blurb there where we could talk about what their roles are, from everything, like when I tell you that where you go and get your gas and the gas tank underneath where you get your gas is monitored by our EPD in conjunction with a contract also from the federal government to checking the water quality of all of our lakes. And this brings us back to our concerns about fertilizer. Get away from St. Augustine grass if you can. Our lakes are all really being impacted, and it was alarming because they have the map that shows
Impaired water bodies,
which includes our crown jewel, the Butler chain, because of high levels of nutrients. And that's purely because I don't believe there are any septics left on that chain, or there may be, but I think it's probably more because people's, potential fertilizer gardening practices. So those things are things we can really impact in all of our decisions all the time. Brownfield conversation. Brownfield is a designation for an area that was at some point being used for something that may have left a contaminant in the ground. And the designation allows for cleanup and then repurposing of that. I think people think of brownfields as being sort of a negative, there's a negative connotation when you hear that, but what it is really it's a land use designation. A lot of times an IKEA store or a Lowe's or a big box stores go on brownfields because it's a good repurposed use of a piece of land that may have had some kind of impact that was gave it that designation. We have someone that works on that. It's just one person. This is the part that I think broke my heart walking around EPD, was they would describe the level of what they're doing, the level of responsibility, the high volume of cases that they have come before them for permitting, for review, for all of those things, and how few staff members they have, how stretched thin they are. Geographically, they're spread out. Time-wise, they're spread out. And the more development we have, the more taxing it is to them without really giving them any more resources to be able to make sure that people are being compliant with their permits, to make sure that what's not supposed to be going in our waterways isn't. So, it's a really big priority of mine to make sure that if we can assist that department in doing their job, that we are. And so I'm going to be a champion for their causes, not just the Green Place, but also the scientists that look at what's in the water and the, all of it.
Oh, we got another question that just came.
Laura Beth says, are there any plans for EV charging stations at the new park? We have none that I'm aware of within Horizon West.
I don't know. That wasn't, like I said, we got a very brief overview, but that is now on my list of things to ask, request, and, try to, we're going to be going, Laura, so this is a perfect time for these type of things to come up, because obviously in government you have limited revenue and unlimited things that you would really like to see funded. And so we want to make sure we're being really deliberate, and we're going to be going into that budget planning phase. So having all these ideas at the table with us when we go to the budget planning with the different departments are really important. And that is an excellent idea, because I think we are very short on charging stations. I know we've got City of Winter Garden, I think Town of Oakland maybe, but we need
I'm
more
seeing
out
them
there.
pop up. I'm seeing them pop up around different places, and I think it's really in the different dealerships and all of the different companies, the manufacturers. It's in their best interest to help fund the installation of these, because then they'll sell more cars if it's more accessible.
Yes.
So
There you go. That's
it might
another
not be a
economic driver.
burden. Yeah, we might probably as a county get approached
Yes.
by some of these companies that are installing.
Well,
these
there was a
charging
list
stations.
of partners that were interested actually in the development of the community park, and maybe that is, when you look at those partnerships, that maybe that is something that we can try to tap into. Because I agree, I think that's what a win-win.
And your last tour that you did in the last 5 minutes, one that I think was one of the more emotional and astounding and just awesome in the most captivating way of like the resources that you don't realize your county is putting into the community that otherwise
Saving
alters and
lives.
shifts the quality of life here for so many people. And it's not marketed publicly, but it really does help all of us if you're able to help those that are the most underserved. You went and toured the children and family services department today.
And we only got the work they do is truly life-saving. It's family saving, and we only got a portion really of it today. And even that took up, it was an amazing chance to meet the people who really do the hardest work in our county in dealing with families in crisis, children in crisis, children that have entered our legal system, sometimes because of stuff they did, sometimes not. And there are far-reaching consequences of not providing the type of services that they really struggle to fund and provide. There are far-reaching consequences of us not making sure those things happen and happen the right way. I think that they do an outstanding job. I've been on the Children and Family Services Board in the past as a citizen volunteer, and I understood just a little teeny portion of what they did. And today we got to really hear about our Head Start program is amazing, and the work they do and the challenges that they faced under the pandemic and the challenges that they face every day. And you talk about our children, that this is, should be our priority. And I think you can judge any society based on how they treat their youngest and their oldest and their most vulnerable. And when you hear the stuff that they're doing, it makes me really, really feel grateful that there are people who have that calling and that are willing to take on those roles. Yeah. What did you think?
I mean, there's so much, because, you would automatically assume that it would only be education based and maybe, nutrition, getting nutrition programs in our schools where the help is needed. But no, it's very comprehensive, from mental health to human trafficking to substance abuse to, homeless prevention programs and transitional housing support. I mean, there's so many things that the county is there to help and provide. And I would just say the one takeaway that I felt was that there's probably so much more need, but people might not even know that these resources are there. So they might not even know to ask.
Yeah.
Or
unfortunately, they don't find it until they're in crisis. So, even though there are ways to access so many things before crisis, sometimes it is the crisis that sort of triggers those services, in the way that they, at that point, become life-saving and or important in the entire system of a family because so if there's uh, let's say there's a child abuse case, negligence or abuse, they oftentimes the call that comes through 2 o'clock in the morning is to the people that work for Orange County. Now the funding sources come from the state also, and there are also federal funds, but they are the boots on the ground, and they are the people that that try to keep those families in safe, separating and then rejoining and safe, keeping counseling and intervention and substance abuse and all these components, all these moving parts that you think how complex family crisis can be, and especially right now. And that today we heard a little bit about sort of each one of those aspects. And I know that I think they feel like it's never enough. We feel like it's never enough because obviously there are so many people, and young people especially, you feel really, really compelled to make sure that if we can send them back into the world whole as an adult and make sure that they still have connectivity to the family, then you're doing some great work. Sometimes that is not easy because that family was what put them in crisis in the first place. So it's really complex, but they have some outstanding professionals and people who are dedicated 24 hours a day. They don't get to clock out. It's not a clock out kind of job.
And I was astounded by how many people were there for 27 plus years. So it's really like a lifestyle, and it's really, you can tell their personalities were perfect for these jobs. So thank you to all of those staff that you dedicate your entire life to helping people.
And you don't go into crisis counseling for the money.
Yeah.
Right? That's not that. That is something, that's a calling.
Mm-hmm.
We met someone who was a counselor there who was also LPN. And I walked away and said to Lee, I felt like she's so maternal. You realize that this is somebody who has something nurturing in them that brought them to that field. Mm-hmm. And so we're so grateful for the work they do in keeping those children safe. And, Great Oaks Village is a county program that helps these children who are, sometimes in the worst times of their life. And, I've had the joy and honor of meeting some of those children that aren't children anymore. They grew up, they came back, some of them have gone back to work there, or intern while in college and tell the story about, their journey and their struggles. And so it's just a very, it makes you realize that I think the mental health thing has come up the last couple of weeks, and we realize how much we have to offer as a county, how many great groups there are in the nonprofit world, organizations, faith-based and citizen-based, and how they have to really come together to capture or provide that net. You talk about a safety net, and that the county really has a great responsibility of making sure that net has extra layers, because it's life or death.
I wish everybody could go on the tours that we go on, because I want to pay more taxes. I want to pay more money so that we can have more of these programs across the board, so that together, collectively, we can have a better quality of life for everyone. And then collectively, when you're in school or when you're at work, people will be in better moods and have better lifestyles.
Yeah, well, and I think it's one of those things that, once again, whenever we ask voters what's important to them, they have consistently come back saying that child welfare is, that children matter to them. So there's not a controversy about that, but somehow making sure that translates into making sure there's enough resources in those areas of social service safety nets. There's a disconnect a lot of times. So, when you hear about, I think there are people who who disparage those social service safety nets as being somehow a government overreach. And I'm like, this is actually life saving. So if you're somebody who understands that children's lives are at risk, and that if we didn't have some of those safety nets, that we would see, even more tragedy than we're seeing. And we're seeing a lot of tragedy. And so, yeah, to your point, when you look at your taxes and you're wondering where they're going, my gosh, it is amazing they do as much as they do with as little as they get. Mm-hmm. And I do think we have a job to share it and continue to share it. And maybe we can even bring in a guest from one of these places to talk a little bit about their day, what a day in the life looks like at crisis intake. And yeah, so we all have a better understanding of where that's going and what decisions are being made, or even who they're partnering with out there in the world. Because I do think, we talked about Matthew's Hope last week. And so I think a lot of people wonder, well, what's the role of a faith-based or a nonprofit? Well, there's really room for all of those services provided for and by some pretty great people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just on a final note, thank you so much to all of the Orange County staff. And yes. I've met so many incredible people so far. We've only been here a month.
And it feels like so much longer because we've been obviously on a fast track to making sure we get all the information we need to provide the best service we can, right? Do our jobs. And I feel really, really grateful because they have allowed me to ask questions and round back again with a question and to give us their time so unselfishly to explain things that, that aren't necessarily intuitive for people who haven't been here for a long time. And there are a lot of people who've been here for over the lifespan of many, many, many elected officials. So for them to have to go back through this again and explain is important. In that way, we can be the most effective we can be. So a really big thanks to them for the tour, the presentation, the tours, the presentations, the briefings, the details on budget decisions, historical decisions. Oh my gosh, I'm always like, so wait, what happened back when? And they know, and they find me old attachments and send them. And because all those pieces and parts go into what happens in our next decisions.
Mm-hmm. Any final notes before we go?
Just a thank you to everybody who does tune in and come by and that reaches out. I know that we have a variety of ways to reach us. And so if you, for whatever reason, haven't gotten in touch with us, I want to emphasize the way to do it is to really email the District 1 office, because that comes to all of us and it is an official line of communication, which means that it will pop up on our computer here at work. We know how to then send that wherever we need to within the organization to get the right answers. And I know that we use social media to try to make sure we're communicating with everybody, but sometimes Messenger and those type of ways of communicating aren't the best ways to then get back in touch with us, just because it's not an official form of communication or dialogue with our constituents in every sense. So we really want to get emails in about those issues, especially ones that are important, ones that we want to bring up to staff or in different departments. So make sure that you're emailing us. And anything you want to see us talk about. I think we're almost ready to get out to District 1 and do some field Facebooks. And so and I'm grateful and thank you so much to Lee and Ernest, who is her kind boyfriend who always sets this up for us every week. I see him, I'm like, it's Friday because Ernest is here. It's Friday. So thank you.
Yeah, have a wonderful weekend, everyone, and we look forward to connecting with you next week. Please email us at district1@ocfl.net.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.